Hey everyone, John here! And most of the GVG crew will be here too. It's myself, Steve, Brandon, and Derek. And we're going to be talking about the worst games we've ever played in our lives, all of us. And we're not going to go into hyperbole here. These are legitimately bad games. No one's going to waltz on in and go, Super Mario Odyssey? Didn't quite jive with me. Worst game ever. We're not doing that. So settle in. But before we hear about these atrocities, we have a word from our sponsor.
This video is sponsored by Raycon. When I'm trying to focus, whether it's at work or on the road, few things are more helpful to me than a good pair of noise-canceling earbuds, and now Raycon's new upgraded everyday earbuds can do just that. Raycon has sold 3 million of their previous everyday earbuds, and this new model offers the same audio quality I expect from the major players, but at half the price. Not only that, but they look great. I got the new royal blue color with a yellow protective case, and I gotta say, I'm in love with the look of these things. They've also got battery life that's second to none, getting an hour and a half from just 10 minutes of charging, and a whopping 32 hours from the included charging case. Raycon's new everyday earbuds are water-resistant, dust-proof, they shut out outside noise with their amazing active noise cancellation, and they can even pair to 2 devices at once. I use mine with my phone and my Switch, and I love not having to disconnect and reconnect them every time I want to change what I'm hooked up to. And right now, you can get them for 15% off. Just head over to buyraycon.com/GVG to get yours. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring today's video.
Over the years, the worst game I've ever played has changed somewhat consistently. There's Kane & Lynch 2, which is still the ugliest, most vile game I've ever played, as it substituted any kind of legitimate fun in its mechanics for pure shock value. Which, to be fair, it stayed with me all this time. Not in a good way, but it has. Then there's Castlevania The Adventure on Game Boy, which is unbearably slow, punishingly difficult, and downright ugly. More recently, I discovered Bomboozled on the Super Nintendo thanks to the NSO, and that's become infamous among fans of my game club as the worst game on the service. It's a puzzle game with poor controls, shoddy graphics, and is simply unfun by even the most charitable measure. But now there's a new contender. Mega Man 3: The Robots Are Revolting for DOS, and it might be the most frustrating thing I've ever played. By the time it was released, there were already 7 Mega Man games to pull from, 4 in the NES, 2 in the Game Boy, and the first Mega Man game on the DOS. The series was firmly established by this point. Hell, the developers had worked on a Mega Man game before, and while the original Mega Man DOS is pretty bad in its own right, it did succeed in feeling like a Mega Man game and was technologically impressive for the time thanks to its smoother scrolling on the hardware. Mega Man 3 DOS is not a Mega Man game, and I mean that literally. It was supposed to be an original title by the creator of Mega Man DOS called Eco Man, but the game's publisher, High Tech Expression, wouldn't publish it unless it was reskinned as a Mega Man game. Once that was done, Capcom USA insisted on reusing the box art of Mega Man 3 in the US, as the Robot Master Bitman roughly resembled Sparkman. So that's why it's called Mega Man 3 and not 2. There never was a Mega Man 2 on DOS. By all accounts, it still should have been better than the original. The amount of Robot Masters has doubled from 3 to 6, the designs are slightly less ridiculous, and the graphics are moderately improved. Instead, it's an absolute mess. The levels are labyrinthine mazes where everything looks too much alike and it's far too easy to get lost. Enemies do not respawn, which seems like a blessing, except that means health drops are limited, and that does not pair well with the endless barrage of mounted turrets that cannot be destroyed and will absolutely shoot you in the middle of platforming. Oh, and if you're on a platform at the time, you will fall through it. Now, the damage Mega Man takes from these shots isn't nearly as harsh as the first DOS game, but contact damage is ramped up to the point that 4 hits could end you instantly. Each level is surprisingly lengthy, and some contain platforming that is downright broken. Bitman's level contains a sequence where if I didn't jump from a specific spot, I would hit an invisible barrier and immediately fall to my death. It is maddening, and this is absolutely a case of brutal levels and easy bosses, because all of them, even with just a Mega Buster, go down with little issue. That said, the theming is all over the place. Why in the world is Torchman based in a sewer level? It's incompetent from top to bottom. And even after completing every level, Wily's Castle involves a series of platforming sections in between rematches with all the bosses. The level is slightly less of a maze than before, though there are sections where it's unclear which path is the right one. But the worst part is the dearth of instant death traps. So many times I would be shot, and the knockback would be just enough to send me to my doom. It is a massive test of patience, and the Wily fight is just as bad as constant streams of acid rain down that you must dodge while making sure not to get too close to the middle where more instant death awaits. It is a trash game from top to bottom that fails as a Mega Man game and makes it a chore to play. Kane and Lynch 2 may be vile and boring, Bomboozle may be annoying and poorly controlled, and Castlevania the Adventure may be excruciatingly slow, but they at least stuck to a vision. Mega Man 3 DOS is a mishmash of Mega Man elements that never come together, never feel good, and only left me with the elation that I never have to touch it again, and the hope that nothing else in the Mega Man series will be this bad again. Not Mega Man in base, not Mega Man X6 or X7, nothing.
So, I've been thinking about my game quite a bit, because in my adult life, it's very rare that I actually play a bad game. Maybe something that goes below expectations, like Sonic Chronicles The Dark Brotherhood. It's not a great RPG, but it's not the worst game ever made. It's still perfectly playable. It can still be fun in areas. So what is actually the worst game I've played? And then I think about licensed games. I've played many, many poor licensed games in my time. I once traded a copy of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure on the Dreamcast for Finding Nemo on PS2, and I can tell you now that was not a good trade. However, the worst game I have ever played has to be Doctor Who, The First Adventure. And I'm pretty eager to talk about this one because I talked for an hour about Doctor Who games and it got demonetized by the BBC. So at least we can monetize it this time. Anyway, Doctor Who, The First Adventure was released for everyone's favorite console, the BBC Micro. And look at it. What do you think you see here? Well, this right here is the Doctor, okay? This is the first level, by the way, and it took me so long. So in this first level, it's like Pac-Man if Pac-Man were designed by a bastard. You're meant to go through this maze and find a bunch of keys until you're eventually allowed to leave. Apart from every time you get a key, the AI, these line things here, they speed up. And once you get the final key, they become way faster than you. And you've got to navigate out of this environment while they are just swimming around as fast as they can. They don't have to worry about being caught on a jaggy. And this is all married by some of the most frustrating controls ever, because if you've played a game from this era, the controls are not up, down, left, right, or WASD. They are like Z and X and like bracket and colon. Like it's very hard to move around. And so this may take you around half an hour, and that's just the first stage. And then you get Frogger if Frogger was giving you a seizure. What are you meant to be looking at here? It is so hard to look at. It's like everything is moving like on the same frame. It's so jaggedy and juggedy and druggedy. And you've got to do this 5 different times. It's much, much harder than it looks. And then you get this level where the Doctor is just shooting pterodactyls. And like this guy doesn't like to use guns. I don't think he would shoot dinosaurs. And this is basically reverse Space Invaders. Only they don't get closer to you. You get closer to them. So your ship is like going to the middle of the screen. It becomes so difficult to avoid all these pterodactyls. And then finally you get this stage here, which I think is like Minesweeper. I never really understood it. I just kind of put things everywhere until eventually it let me pass. I don't understand. And you've got to do all these games with the same pool of lives. If you die on any of them, you go all the way back to the beginning. And I can tell you, I've become very familiar with Doctor Who The First Adventure. It's extremely difficult, it's not good, but at least it can be ingrained into your mind. If anyone wants to come over to my house and watch me play Doctor Who The First Adventure, I can do that for you. Also, they give you more regenerations than canonically a Time Lord can have, and that makes me mad. But yeah, I don't like this game. Bad game.
Oh, Dragon Ball Z Sagas. A 3D beat-em-up set in the world of Dragon Ball Z. That combination makes a lot of sense, so you'd think they'd be able to make a pretty good game out of this. Instead, what we got was a big heaping pile of Gallic garbage. Dragon Ball Z Sagas does a lot of things wrong. First off, you have two main combos that you start off with. You can punch 5 times, and you can kick 5 times. You can throw a single ki blast, and that's it! That's your whole moveset at the beginning of the game. The rest of your abilities are locked behind upgrades that you get by gathering Z-coins. And normally I'd find an upgrade system like this enjoyable. Getting stronger over the course of the game is something that is very much in line with the world of Dragon Ball. It makes a lot of sense. But it starts to fall apart when you realize that a lot of the upgrades that the game wants you to get are quality of life type things that you should just have from the beginning. Like the ability to fly fast. This is just annoying. There's no gameplay benefit to having this ability other than not wasting your time. You can say the same thing about fast charging. Why is charging slow the default to begin with? Charging fast should be the default. Charging even faster should have been the upgrade. The game doesn't become remotely fun to play until you've gotten a lot of these upgrades out of the way. As far as the actual combat is concerned, it's fine. It's not the most exciting thing. You and your enemies basically share all the same abilities and same animations, some of which can look very funny, such as this backwards walking one. It can be annoying when you're fighting a group of enemies and they'll spawn like 2 or 3 projectile-only enemies in the background that constantly pelt you with ki blasts, which makes fighting the little dudes really annoying. Luckily, they die with 1 ki blast, so if you're able to break away and throw one, you'll be able to knock them out. That said, the lock-on system in this game is awful. Your character will automatically target an enemy with a ki blast even if you're not locked onto them, and selecting who you want to lock onto is just really messy. The levels themselves aren't too long, but the runtime really ramps up once you get to the boss fights. These take forever. For no reason, they just take forever. These enemies have way too much HP. If you play this game on normal, you're going to spend upwards 5 to 6 minutes fighting a single boss fight. That might not sound like a lot, but with your limited movesets, the amount of damage you take from bosses, it adds up to a pretty miserable experience. Even transforming into a Super Saiyan ends up being a really miserable experience. You have to do a bunch of melee attacks in order to build up this bar. Once the bar is full, you charge your ki to max until you transform. At that point, you become much stronger, much faster, but for a very limited amount of time. That bar you spent time filling up now starts draining. You can build it back up by doing melee attacks, but it's very hard to keep it going long enough for it to really be meaningful. And that's super annoying in the final boss fight against Cell, where you have to get the bar up to Super Saiyan, stay in Super Saiyan as Gohan, and then build the bar up as it's draining to Super Saiyan 2. You don't do any damage to Cell unless you're Super Saiyan 2, so if you fail to make it to Super Saiyan 2 early on in the fight, you're just gonna die. The character models are pretty ugly. They look okay from a distance, but when you get up close, it looks pretty bad. There's also an issue with the way they do voice lines. Characters will just shout things like Vegeta just screaming, "Shut up!" at the beginning of this fight with Raccoon. Shut up! But the voices don't come from the characters. They're a global sound, so whenever a character talks, it just doesn't sound quite right. And boy, do they talk a lot. All of those things together are pretty obnoxious, but I think the biggest issue with this game overall is that it's just a buggy mess. I mean, it's just super broken. Enemies that you fight can get stuck, or fall through the ground so you can't kill them. You can get stuck for no reason and not be able to move. There are also some glitches that work in your favor. If you unlock the uppercut move as well as the throw and the teleport, you can combine those moves together to get way up high in the air. You can use that to get out of bounds, or in the case of this timed fight with Frieza, I just hit up in the air where he couldn't hit me until the timer ran out. Once you've purchased all of the abilities, you can connect them in ways that are fairly interesting thanks to the teleport ability, but in the end, it's still just not a very well put together fighter. You just don't have enough options, and you rarely feel like you're in the world of Dragon Ball Z because of it. You can play the game co-op, which can be fun, and after you beat the game once, you unlock the ability to play through any stage as any character, including some characters that weren't playable, such as Krillin, Yamcha, Tien, and most importantly, Bardock, and the always Super Saiyan Broly. So if you want to have a victory lap after all the pain you went through, you can literally melt everything as Broly. That said, you can't play as the same character in co-op. I'm just kidding, you can. If you press A at the same time on the character select screen with both players, you'll just pick the same character. This game's so broken and stupid. That said, I did have my fun with it as a kid, though today I wouldn't touch this game with a 10-foot power pole.
One of my least favorite games of all time is a little-known spin-off of the Bomberman series. It was known as Robo Warrior here in the US and Bomber King in Japan, and it released in 1988. Now I want you to imagine for a moment that your mom goes out to the store to pick up a game for you to surprise you, and she brings this home. Back in the 80s, people didn't really have access to information about games the same way they do today, so my mom just went to Toys R Us and asked what is obviously a sadist behind the counter what game she should get for a 6-year-old, and he supplied this absolute flaming turd of a game. And when I got it, I was excited initially. I thought I had to figure it out, crack the code. It just turns out it's just a horrible game. It's Bomberman with this ridiculous item management mechanic strapped onto it. No longer do you have unlimited bombs, you have to place each bomb carefully and hope that when you explode something you find more bombs to pick up. You have to manage candles so that you can light up dark environments, and most importantly, you have to manage an eternally depleting health bar. You have a limited amount of energy that amounts to about 30 seconds to a minute worth of gameplay, and if you do not find a health pickup in that time, you are dead. And every single thing you do depletes your health, from walking to shooting to bombing. All of it is constantly serving to kill you, and that's assuming you don't take any damage from any enemies, because if you do, well, you're gonna die even quicker. And as a 6-year-old, this was the most frustrating experience I had ever had with a video game. It was the first game in my life that I can really remember just deciding to put down and never play again. I revisited it as an adult, and while it's not nearly as difficult to understand and manage, it's just a game that sucks. I cannot stand Robo Warrior, Bomber King, whatever you want to call it. It's just simply a bad game.
So, have any of you guys played the games listed in this video? And if you have, let us know what you think. Were we a bit harsh on them? Were we not harsh enough? And also let us know the worst game you have ever played in your life. I'm kind of curious whether people actually do play bad games these days. It's kind of tricky to. The social norm and reviews make it so easy to find something that is guaranteed to be good that we don't really take the risks to play a bad thing anymore. So I'm kind of curious if people actually do play bad games. Maybe for some people, Mario Odyssey is the worst game they've ever played because their bar of quality is so high. Who knows? Anyway, thank you for watching, and we will catch you next time. Bye-bye.